Hey y'all, it's Stacy. Welcome back to the kitchen. Today we're going to tackle one of those things that people are often intimidated by, but I'm going to show you how to make the perfect buttermilk pound cake. With some simple techniques and a few tips, I can assure you you're going to turn out a perfect pound cake every time. Now, if you like this video and love this recipe, we would like for you to like and subscribe to the channel. That way you ensure you get notified every time we post great new recipes here on YouTube. Pound cake is all about technique, and there are certain things that we can do to ensure that we get a light, fluffy, beautifully textured pound cake every single time. As we work through this recipe, I'm going to explain those little idiosyncrasies to you in the hopes that you're going to turn out a perfect pound cake. Now, we're going to start by creaming together our butter and our sugar. Now, this is a super important step because what happens is we're going to aerate our butter and start to dissolve that sugar. Now, we're going to do this for like 5 minutes. And I know you're thinking, really 5 minutes? But I'm serious, 5 whole minutes, because we want to make sure that we whip air into that butter. That's going to help our ingredients emulsify and give our cake the light texture that we need. All right, in my stand mixer here, I'm going to add 1.5 cups of unsalted butter that's room temperature. Now, I don't mean that you zapped in the microwave. I mean that you've literally let set out and get to room temperature, because we don't want it too warm and we don't want it too cold. What I've done here is I sliced it because this will get to room temperature faster this way. I'm going to put it right in my mixer here. Now, I'll often get questions, can I use salted butter and omit the other salt in the recipe? You can, but you run the risk of things not working exactly like they should, because all salted butters have different amounts of salt in them. So when we start with unsalted butter, we're controlling the salt content. Yeah, we're going to add a little bit of salt later, but we're going to know exactly how much salt we have in there. I'm adding 2.5 cups of white granulated sugar. I'm going to turn the mixer on and we're going to beat this together for 5 minutes. I'm going to stop about halfway through and just scrape down the sides to make sure everything's good and combined. All right, at the end of 5 minutes, you can see that the color and texture of this mixture has changed. It's creamy, it's super fluffy, and it's much lighter in color than the original butter color. Next, we're going to add our eggs. I've got 4 large eggs that are also at room temperature. Now, you might ask, why room temperature? Well, room temperature ingredients are going to emulsify and mix together a lot more easily than cold ingredients. So again, this is one of those steps that you're going to want to think of in advance and sit these out so that they can come to room temperature before you need them. I'm going to add them one at a time, mixing just enough to get them combined. At this point, we run the risk of over-mixing. And if we over-mix, we're going to develop gluten, we're going to whip these eggs too much, and we're going to end up with a pound cake that fails. So while on the step with the butter and the sugar, we really want to whip the heck out of it, once we add eggs and flour, we only want to mix enough just to get the ingredients combined. Again, I'm going to add these one at a time, and about halfway through, I'm going to scrape down the sides again. All right, let's talk about our dry mixture here. I'm going to start with 3.5 cups of regular all-purpose flour. To that, I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of regular table salt. Then I'm just going to whisk this together. All right, now for the ingredient that gives our cake its namesake, some buttermilk. I've got about 1 cup of whole buttermilk here. What we're going to do is we're going to add the dry and the wet alternately. I'm going to kind of visually divide the flour in thirds. I'm going to add about 1/3 of the flour, half the buttermilk, another 1/3 of the flour, the other half of the buttermilk, and then the last bit of the flour. Again, with each addition, we want to mix just until it's combined. We don't want to over-mix at this point. All right, now we're going to add some flavor here. I like to use a combination of vanilla extract or flavoring and almond extract. You're going to need 3 to 4 teaspoons, just depending on the strength. I'm using 2 teaspoons of vanilla and 2 teaspoons of almond. Now, I'm not a snob when it comes to vanilla. You don't need to buy a $60 bottle of vanilla extract. Oftentimes, I find vanilla flavoring works just as well and adds even more flavor than the expensive stuff. Grab what you got in the cabinet, and you can be creative here too. You could use lemon, almond, butter. There's so many options. I just happen to like this vanilla almond combination. 2 teaspoons of vanilla and 1 teaspoon of almond. Again, I'm just gonna mix this just enough to combine. All right, so I've got my oven preheated to 325 degrees, and I've got a 10 to 12 cup bundt pan here. This is a nonstick pan that I've greased with a little butter and flour. Now, you know, there are so many different options out there. There's the cooking sprays that have flour in them. You can make like the homemade cake goop. You can use Crisco and flour, butter and flour. I don't necessarily have a recommendation there, but what I will say is you need to know your pan. I know that this pan rarely sticks when I use this method. So sometimes you have to fool around and you may have to mess up a pound cake or two to figure out what the right combination is. I love this pan. It always works well for me. I've even used just the cooking spray with the flour in this pan and I've never had trouble with it sticking. We're gonna put our batter in here. You can see just how thick and beautiful this is. Perfectly emulsified because we made sure that we used those room temperature ingredients. Then I'm just gonna use my spatula to kind of spread this around to make sure it's even in our pan here. And I'm just gonna tap it on the counter a few times just to make sure everything settles down in the pan right. All right, this is gonna go in a 325-degree oven for about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes. You can use the toothpick test to test doneness, and I'm gonna show you another trick too. All right, so our cake is done. After about an hour, hour and 15 minutes, it's nice and golden brown. Like I said, you can use the toothpick test here. I also sometimes will use my instant read thermometer. All you have to do is just take the temperature of the cake right in the center where you would take or where you would use a toothpick. You want your instant read thermometer to read between 208 and 210 degrees. I'm gonna let this rest in the pan for about 10 minutes and then we're gonna turn it out. All right, so after about 10 minutes, we're gonna turn this out. I like to use a platter or a plate or a cake plate or something that's a little bit bigger just to make this process a little bit easier. And I also love the handles on this cake pan. It makes it a whole lot simpler. All right, pop that right on the top. We're gonna say a little prayer and flip it over. And there you go. You can see just how beautiful this baked up. You know, pound cake is one of those things that I actually love the next day. So when I know I want a pound cake or I'm gonna need it for some type of event or something, I always make it a day in advance. Something about it aging gives it a really great flavor. Folks, you can find this super easy recipe with all the tips and tricks for making the perfect pound cake by heading over to the blog at southernbite.com and just search Buttermilk Pound Cake. Y'all enjoy.